Hey, you geeks! I'm trying something new this week. I'm going to talk about the Cosmere without spoiling a single story. This is for people who want to get into the Cosmere, but when faced with this shelf at Barnes & Noble, don't know what to pick first.
But everyone's gonna get confused! We gotta go back to the beginning of the story.
Let me reassure you that there are very few hard rules about Cosmere reading order. The Cosmere is kind of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It tells multiple stories spread across multiple worlds. Most of these stories are standalone and are valid starting points into the Cosmere. Everyone in the fandom has their own opinions about what is the best way to read everything else. This video is mine. First, let me explain the order I read the Cosmere in, then the order I recommend to new readers. Scadrial. Following popular advice of 2 years ago, I started with Mistborn Era 1. This series can be a bit difficult to begin because the first book is sometimes titled just Mistborn, and sometimes Mistborn: The Final Empire. This was a marketing decision.
Drop the, just Facebook.
Rest assured that if you pick up a book that begins with Ash fell from the sky, and it features a girl named Vin and a thief named Kelsier, you found the right book. Starting here, for me, was a bad choice. This is early Sanderson writing a very dark world, and he succeeded in making me feel dejected.
This is the worst possible thing! Why?
In hindsight, it's really a credit to Sando that he made me feel such strong feelings. Yet after reading The Hero of Ages, I left the Cosmere and had no intention of returning until fate decided otherwise. I should note here that there is one standalone novella set in this period, called Mistborn Secret History.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
Don't read that until after the first 3 books, because it is an alternative perspective on the events of this trilogy. Cell. After dabbling with other fantasy authors who were okay, and being impressed by Sanderson's YA work, I got hooked back into the Cosmere by The Emperor's Soul. I had studied Taiwan in college and was intrigued by the book's promise to show a magic system inspired by traditional Chinese stamp carving. It didn't hurt that the book also won a Hugo Award. So I picked it up and was blown away by the range of emotions this book made me feel. Excellently paced with a gripping plot. My belief in Sanderson's story craftsmanship was thoroughly stoked, though I still never forgot how he hurt me on Scadrial. These 2 thoughts in mind, I did a little research and found that The Emperor's Soul was set on a planet named Cell, where Elantris was also set. So I picked up Elantris. It's a Hunchback of Notre Dame, but Ren McCormick comes in and challenges the law against dancing. There is a lot of heart in this story. My friend is considering introducing his new wife to this book on their honeymoon, because only Sanderson can say true love in a city of magic lepers.
Everybody caught footloose with me at the party at the leper colony.
Elantris is Sanderson's first published book, and it shows. It's a very slow build through which the reader must trust Sanderson will pay it all off. He does. And while I admit the book has its flaws, I still love this book. One of its flaws Sanderson does actually fix in a short story he released later called The Hope of Elantris. This must be read after reading Elantris as a book because it covers the final battle from a separate perspective. Back 2 years ago, this book was enough to convince me that I liked Sanderson's style, so I took the deep dive. Roshar. Sanderson's flagship epic series is the Stormlight Archive, set on a world called Roshar. How to sum up Stormlight? Trojan War gets infinitely more complex as both sides consider killing the gods instead of each other.
Apollo sees everything. Perhaps it is not wise to offend him.
But there is also giant crustaceans and mental illness running rampant. I read the first 3 books in March and April of 2020, often only spending a few hours between books to sleep, since I would finish well after midnight, then need to start the next book at dawn. These are massive books, but they break down into very readable chapters. Unable to set the main series down, after Oathbringer, I had to go back and read Edgedancer. Did that reduce some of Edgedancer's tension? Yes. But Sanderson's writing is so rich that the book was enjoyable, even knowing more or less how it would end. Like fans who enjoyed Kenobi, knowing Obi-Wan's destiny did not make his journey any less enjoyable. Although, to be brutally honest, I didn't particularly like the character featured in Edgedancer until book 3. At this point, I had run out of new Sanderson books to read, so reading old ones sounded like a great idea. Once released, I did read both Dawnshard and Rhythm of War. Again, you can read Rhythm of War without reading Dawnshard, but I doubt book 5 will be so forgiving. Nulthus. Only one book happens on Nulthus, Warbreaker. To sum up, imagine the myth of Eros and Psyche mixed with Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. In short, it features sibling rivalry, arranged marriages, and attempted seduction. All of that skin is why Sanderson calls this his romance novel. But my friend who actually reads romance novels found it too philosophically dense for her taste. If you are going to get into Sanderson, be prepared for such density. Warbreaker is also an early Sanderson work. He wrote it in real time on his website with fan feedback. So the pacing isn't his best, and the ending is rather abrupt. But it is definitely worth the read. Other planets. Here is where things get very complicated. Sanderson published an anthology of short stories in a book called Arcanum Unbounded. However, almost all these stories are available for sale as separate novellas. So if you come across a stray Sanderson story in the wild, it's more than likely a standalone, such as Shadows of Silence in the Forest of Hell. Despite that foreboding title, I had a very good time reading this story. I do enjoy the frontier woman fights for her family trope. Sanderson here also learned to balance character darkness with reader enjoyment. Next is White Sand, which happens on Taldane. The first chapter of this graphic novel series is included in Arcanum Unbounded. The rest I had to go and pick up physical graphic novels to read. Generally, I'm an audiobook reader, so reading pages with words was so hard.
You mean you have to use your hands? That's like a baby's toy.
The original artwork left much to be desired. The story itself features Sanderson's reinterpretation of the Fremen from Dune while retooling plot structures which had annoyed me in The Well of Ascension into enjoyable threads. Then there's Six of Dusk, which between its pages is Sanderson's take on city lady and rugged man get stuck in the wilderness.
Skills?
Yeah. You send them out into the wilderness with a pocket knife and a Q-tip and they build you a shopping mall.
However, the larger world building entails a lot of spoilers for the entire Cosmere. Do not pick up the opening chapter of the Six of Dusk sequel online unless you want to be thoroughly confused. The other three, Hope of Elantris, Mistborn Secret History, and Edge Dancer, we've already talked about. Then there's another Mistborn story called The 11th Metal, which is sort of like a prologue to Mistborn Era 1. It was fine. In sum, I'm glad to have picked this up well into my Sanderson reading adventure. But there was one place I had not yet dared to return. Scadrial. Again. I'm actually sad I waited so long to pick up these books. Where Era 1 was a plodding story, this was a deft adventure. It's called Era 2 because it's set some 300 years after the first series, with a mostly completely new cast of characters, with Era 1's characters relegated to history books. Often considered a Western because its main character likes his hat and duster, it's really more of a frontiersman Mr. Smith goes to Washington to clean up this town.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Mr. Smith also has an existential crisis about his god, because what's a Sanderson novel without an existential crisis about the nature of divinity? I am thoroughly looking forward to Book 4's release later this year, and by process of elimination, no, it will be the next Cosmere book I read. After that, Sanderson is releasing 4 secret novels next year, 3 of which are Cosmere, allowing me to look ahead.
This is the future.
For people who want to go into these completely blind, skip to the timestamp listed on the screen. Lumar. Secret Project 1 will be delivered to me next January, and I will probably read it within a few days. I'd say this book looks to be Sanderson's version of The Princess Bride.
Yes, you're very smart. Shut up.
A story told in a unique manner, but will be equally hilarious and heartwarming at the same time. Secret Project 3 takes place on 2 planets, neither of which have been named, though I'm pretty sure we'll find out in the story. Less silly than Secret Project 1, it still promises to be a fun, Ghibli-esque Your Name style adventure, with real monsters and hopefully real romance. I look forward to getting Sanderson's next lie in June. Secret Project 4. Once again, this book is difficult to sum up. Its premise leans a lot on the solitary wandering man coming across a village of good people in need of a hero and a hero in need of a family. Yet I predict it will be so much more. Here is where Sanderson has played the uninitiated Kickstarter backers dirty. This book features a character from the Stormlight archive and is set after the 5th book of that series. The 5th book, which hasn't been written yet. In the vein of Six of Dusk, I am sure that this plot will reveal very little about Stormlight 5's ending, but reading Stormlight 1 through 4 and Shadows of Silence in the Forest of Hell first will certainly help the reader to better understand this book's background. And so we return to our map overview.
I'm the map, I'm the map, I'm the map, I'm the map.
Like most maps, there are preferable routes through the Cosmere, but you can really start anywhere you want and go anywhere you want, but not without consequences. As mentioned before, there are really only 2 series whose main novels should be read in publication order. I've heard tell of people who read Mistborn Era 2 before Mistborn Era 1, and that does work while reading that series, but doing so will spoil most of the plot of Mistborn Era 1. As for the rest, Sanderson is notorious for putting Pixar-style Easter eggs in his work.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, you know. Oh, that's cute.
To have any chance of catching all those eggs, you'd have to read the books in release order. But I don't recommend that because Sanderson's early works are not as readable as his current ones. Most Easter eggs don't affect the fundamentals of the host book's plot, though I was glad to have read most of the Cosmere before I read Rhythm of War. I have organized my map more or less from oldest in the upper left corner to newest in the bottom right. Also, I have stacked them from lighter novels, the romances, at the top, with the darker, more brooding ones at the bottom. Though as you move into the present, I'm betting that Secret Project 4's darkness will be more enjoyable than Mistborn Era 1's darkness. I recommend starting in the romances. I think Secret Project 3 will be the most tonally in line with the rest of the Cosmere. Starting there seems like the best idea. Moving back to Secret Project 1, where there is that unique narrative voice that is completely new. Then jumping back in time to Warbreaker. As a standalone, it's very approachable, but it is an older Sanderson. It's not his best work, but it does include all his hallmarks of romance, philosophy, humor, and
Jealousy! Anger! Betrayal!
along with relations between the divine and the natural. From Warbreaker, you could either finish off the romances with Elantris and hit up the Emperor's soul while you're there, or dive into Mistborn Era 1 and circle back to Elantris later. I do recommend reading Elantris before Stormlight because Sanderson recycled many character tropes from Elantris and revitalized them in Stormlight. Each has its own story, but Stormlight feels like a more fully realized Elantris. Readers who read Stormlight before Elantris generally leave disappointed, but if you read them in the other direction, you'll find both stories more enjoyable. Once you've read Mistborn Era 1, you can either go directly to Era 2, or even skip over to Roshar and read the Stormlight archive. Once you've gotten through Words of Radiance, I believe you are ready to read Arcanum Unbounded. And then, last of all, would I recommend reading Secret Project 4. Of course, these are just recommendations with enough information, I hope, to help you decide your own journey through the Cosmere. One of my friends started with Stormlight and has the most original theory about the books, simply because he hasn't read anything else. If you want to know more about these books, you can check out my reviews, or you could read and find out. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you would like to see more. Your patronage is greatly appreciated.